Dear learners, I am Dr. Sufyan Ahmad, working as Deputy Librarian in Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today I am going to discuss a very important topic, that is item budget. As you all know that there are 5 major types of budget, such as item budget, programming budget, performance budget, planning programming budget and zero based budget. Out of these 5 types of budget, item budget is the oldest method of budgeting. It is also known as line item or incremental or historical or object of expenditure type budgeting. Probably it is the most common type of budget that divides item of expenditure line by line into broad categories such as books and journals, salaries and allowances, equipment, supplies, capital expenditure, contingencies, etc., with further subdivisions for each of these broad categories. This is the usual traditional method which, by taking into account past expenditure on each item, prepares the current budget. Hence, it is also called historical budgeting. The budget is prepared with a small increase of say 5% or 10% for each major item of expenditure of the previous year's allocation, assuming that all current programs are as good and necessary. The advantage of this method of budgeting is that it is relatively easy to prepare, present and understand. To some extent, it ensures that the funds provided are spent for the purpose stated. It is extensively practiced, but it has certain weaknesses also. This method does not suggest any future projections. It does not necessarily involve any review as to what amount are to be spent in terms of activities and services. Secondly, it moves in the same manner as in the past year without any forward push. Thirdly, this tends to ossify and rigidify the budget. In other words, you can say that budget funds earmarked for a particular item cannot be spent for any other purpose. I mean to say that the financial rules would not allow you the shifting of expenditure from one head to another. For instance, funds allocated for equipment, if unspent, cannot be shifted to acquisition for a few important titles of current journals or books, even if fully justified. It emphasizes tools rather than what these tools have to achieve. It also has a tendency to tempt to disguise needs and ask for more money than needed. Above all, it lacks a forward look and not provides accountability for performance. The item or object of expenditure budget is the most common form and has been used for many years. Based entirely on line item accounting, it lists those items necessary to conduct an activity such as personnel, equipment, supplies and books, usually in a standard format that does not vary from year to year or from agency to agency. Continuity is thus provided and the new budget can be constructed from the previous year's document by listing the same line items and by varying amounts to be spent depending upon recent experience. Little planning is necessary in developing this type of budget, as cost figures can simply be increased to meet inflationary factors. If careful accounts are kept, the spending picture for each item indicates the extent to which the budgeted amount for that item was appropriate. An item for telephone cost might be well under budget because of installation of a new system, while the utility cost may be well over the allocated amount because of unusually cold weather. Adjustment to reflect changed expenditures in certain items plus an inflationary factor constitute the new budget proposal. History of item budget. If we look back to the history of item budget, Nicholas Henry indicates that all governments have always had some form of line budget. From the days of the ancient courts of Egypt, Babylon and China, something was needed to keep track of expenses. Prior to the introduction of this system, a lump sum was the budgetary request of the people, groups and institutions. Little or no indication was made as to how the money would be spent. It is said that England was the first among Western countries to come up with rules and principles that served as a base for the development of modern budgeting. This goes back to the early part of the 18th century, since the budget was the central of the struggle between the king and parliament in English history. Ever since the 12th century, the English experience influenced American leaders when drafting the constitutions in 1789. Thomas D. Lynch indicates that modern reform in budgeting started with reactions against corruption, not concern for government efficiency. It all started in 1707, 1 year after the New York Bureau of Municipal Research was founded. The Bureau prepared the first detailed fiscal report emphasizing the need for a municipal budget system in the USA. The Bureau was produced a budget by object classification for the Department of Health of the City of New York. In 1912, a speech by President Taft regarding the Taft Commission report highlighted the need for object classification budgeting in all federal government departments and agencies. In 1921, the Taft Commission's proposed budgetary reform was enacted and most cities in the USA began reforming their budget accordingly. The item budget or line item budget approach therefore was the first and the earliest formal budget approach. Writers commonly date this approach to early 1921 when the Taft reform enactment took place. Item budgeting, though still in vogue, dominated the American scene from 1920 to 45. But this type of budgeting system has several inherent limitations such as number 1, it does not lend itself to long range planning. Number 2, it does not encourage examining whether or not activities are producing desirable results. The budget cannot be related to measurable objectives. Number 3, new appropriations are made on the basis of the previous year's budget. Number 4, it encourages competition for available funds among units of the organizations. Number 5, any duplication, redundant activities and tasks are hard to detect and document. Number 6, it encourages management by crisis because there is tendency to concentrate only on the most pressing demands, thereby avoiding activities whose fiscal effects cannot be seen immediately. Number 7, difficulty in relating the item budget to the goals of the parent organization. Number 8, the reality that comparing this year to last year is more complex and represents variables unaccounted for within the item budget. Number 9, line items are only units of program, but not the measurable outputs. Number 10, it is more focused on programs than output and end user satisfaction. Now, I am going to discuss item budget with reference to library. The item budget enumerates estimated expenditure by type and quantity for a specified period of time, usually 1 year, which is the fiscal year. In libraries, Personnel are listed by type of positions such as library attendant, professional assistant, assistant librarian, deputy librarian, librarian, etc. The budget is divided into sections according to organizational units, departments, divisions, sections, and various types of expenditure are listed by category. The primary purpose of the item budget is to control on expenditure to ensure that public money is spent for the purpose intended and to monitor and protect fiscal resources. Because of this controlling nature, the item budget encourages management to balance the budget and to review regularly how the financial affairs of the organizations are proceeding. Thus, the item budget provides for short range fiscal control with built in rigidity. This type of budget is closely related to incremental budgeting, under which whatever is the budget is to an extent frozen till new budget is developed based on increments to the base figures. These types of budget and its incremental variations are easy to prepare, as they are based on previous action and are easy to control in that variation in each line of item for the agency can be plotted and reviewed over a number of years. It is possible to determine the extent to which salaries or the supplies necessary to run a library have increased. The relative cost of the library can be compared to that of running other similar libraries within the overall governance structure, or the cost of running a similar activity in other universities, urban government or industries. Budget development and accounting are both simple, following a standard form and practice. The major problem in item budgeting is, which is a fundamental problem, is that there is no requirement for planning. The budget can be developed independently of what occurs in the library. It would be in extreme case to have an item budget prepared with no consideration of library activities, but it is possible. Item budgets identify the ingredients of a program, but not the product. Books, workstation, staff and space are funded rather than, for example, reference service. The service must conform to the budget money allocated for its various ingredients. A planned program places emphasis on what is done or will be done, and then the resources needed to carry out the plan are itemized. In the item format, a set of resources is identified and the task is to put them together as best one can to form a program. This type of budget is used usually by librarians to allocate funds for a succeeding year in the incremental or line item method. The approach is oriented to expenditure, itemizing proposed disbursement under different heads of units. The expenditure side of the item budget or incremental budget is made up of personal emoluments, other charges and capital or development item. Therefore, the item budget is often called incremental budgeting, which involves picking of last year's budget figure and adding the percentage to arrive at the fiscal year budget. The percentage added is based essentially on three factors, namely number 1, trend of activities, number 2, inflation, and number 3, the available fund. In item budgeting, provision is made essentially for wages and personal emoluments of staff, cost of books, cost of journals, purchase and maintenance of equipment, purchase of non-book materials, communication such as mail, telephone, fax, transportation, then general overhead costs such as electricity, water, etc. Outsourcing such as cleaning, security, photocopying, binding, etc. Maintenance of buildings and so on. As a library manager, item budgeting is the best type of budget that suits library because of the reason such as Number 1, it is simple to operate and understand. Number 2, it suits the library's level of development where there is paucity of data. Number 3, it is cheaper to produce. Number 4, it encourages the continuity of projects. Number 5, the method ensures that budget is translated in monetary language and relates to the relevant activity operations. Number 6, allocations into heads and subheads facilitate the monitoring of performance. Although the practice in every library will be varied to suit local circumstances, there are some basic principles in the preparation of budgets that should be stated. It is a process that starts at least 6 or 7 months before the commencement of the financial year and is a task which the librarian and the finance officer undertake together. Item budget is commonly used budgeting method for financial planning. Listing specific revenue resources such as fines, print and copy etc. and expenditure categories such as personnel, supplies, equipment, print materials, cereals etc. As the name suggests item, each category of activity is treated as separate unit from the list. It lists those items necessary to conduct an activity such as personnel, equipment, supplies and books, usually in a standard format that does not vary from year to year or from system to system. Item budget facilitates low levels of detail for both planning and cost control purposes. Often the accounting function of the parent organization develops accounts and sub accounts on a company wide basis. In that case, the library uses the company accounting scheme. Some of the advantages of item type budget are: it is necessary to prepare and project each unit in detail for both planning and cost control purposes and helps in comparing performance from one fiscal period to another fiscal period. Continuity is thus provided and the new budget can be constructed from the previous year's document by listing the same items and by varying amounts to be spent depending upon recent experience. Simple planning is necessary in developing this type of budget as cost figures can simply be increased to meet inflationary factor. Now, I am going to discuss the advantage of item budgets. Number 1, it is very simple and clear. Number 2, it helps to facilitate expenditure control. Number 3, it is very useful in the reporting of financial statistics. Number 4, it is easy to review, and number 5, it is very good accounting and control device. Now, there are certain disadvantages of this budgeting system also. Number 1, it does not provide an incentives to save money. Number 2, it places attention on a small number of relevant values rather than placing attention on all important relevant values. Number 3, it fails to show what the money is being used for the terms of programs. Number 4, it fails to show the relationship between the expenditures made and the results obtained. Number 5, it tends not to change and therefore, it tends to remain rigid. And number 6, it does not offer an optimal vehicle for organizational self analysis or planning procedure for the preparation of the budget. The budget should be prepared very carefully and not haphazardly. All the requirements should be incorporated into an annual estimated based on the policy decisions which are taken from time to time throughout the year. To prepare the library budget, we should keep some important points in our mind, such as: number 1, compare the estimated budget with previous expenditure. Number 2, the estimated budget should be in accordance with the proposed program, and number 3, it should also be as per the standards and norms widely accepted. For ensuring a faultless budget, a proper procedure has to be followed. The exact and faultless budget depends on successful implementation of various plans. Now, I am going to conclude the discussion budget is seen primarily as a plan of action, as it is based on the decision how a library is to continue to function and to develop during the coming year. The compilation of the budget is to carry out with great care and responsibility. However, all library expenditures and revenues should be complete, comprehensive and include all activities of library. The most appropriate type of budget considered most in achieving the desired objectives in every library. Item budget is generally the most traditional method in which the current budget is prepared based on the past expenditure on each item. Hence, it is also called a historical budget. In this method, the budget is prepared by increasing the allocation of each item of expenditure by 5 or 10% each year, assuming that all present items are necessary and important. This budget item is divided into broad categories. The advantage of this method, as we have already discussed, that budgeting is relatively easy to prepare, present and understand. In item budget, the item of the expenditure are divided line by line into broad categories such as books and journals, salaries and allowances, equipment, contingencies, etc., with further subdivisions of each of these broad categories. This is the usual traditional method, which by taking into account past expenditure of the previous allocation, assuming that all current programs are good and necessary. This budgetary method does not go into the evaluation of activities and services of performance. Item budget is the most widely used approach in libraries due to its simplicity and its control orientation. It is referred to as the historical approach because librarians often base their expenditure request on historical expenditure and revenue data. One important aspect of item budgeting is that it offers flexibility in the amount of control established over the use of resources. Depending on the level of expenditure, details such as fund, function, object, etc., incorporated into the document. Now, if we look back to the advantage of item budgeting, that it offers simplicity. You can easily budget for each area of department of your library based on historical expenditures as required in previous years. If the amount of these expenditure has been consistent over a period of years, then the item budgeting can offer a simple and reliable means of anticipating expenses for the coming year, while saving time and efforts in the budget preparation. Another advantage of item budget is that it can be easy to justify the expenditures. Proposed expenditures are based on historical needs, which makes very little to dispute among departments within the organization. This is all for today's discussions. I hope you all have found this lecture very useful. We will meet again with a new topic. Till then, take care and goodbye. Thank you.